Dear Mr. Bulcke, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you at the University of Zurich, organized by the Europa Institute at the University of Zurich. The Europa Institute is among the leading centers of expertise for European law and politics. It not only provides advanced legal training, but also promotes the critical discussion of current political or social issues. Lectures like today are therefore organized on a regular basis. With Paul Bulcke, the Europa Institute managed to invite yet another expert from the world of international business. Allow me to briefly introduce our guest to you. In 2017, Mr. Bulcke became chairman of the board of directors of Nestlé. Before, he served as chief executive officer of Nestlé between 2008 and 2016. His career with Nestlé has taken him to many countries around the world. For example, to Chile, Portugal, the Czech Republic, and to Germany. In addition to his work with Nestlé, Paul Bulcke holds a variety of other engagements. He also serves as vice president of L'Oréal, is chairman of the World Economic Forum Community of Chairpersons, and a member of the board of trustees of Avenir Suisse. These are just a few of his diverse activities. It would go way beyond the scope of my welcome address to mention them all. Mr. Bulcke, on behalf of the University of Zurich, thank you very much for joining us and for speaking to us today. With you, the list of renowned personalities who spoke at the University of Zurich is one name richer. I am very much looking forward to your speech. Since universities worldwide are also affected by the times of ambiguity, you will address in your contribution. As public interest in science increases, universities are more and more required to compete in a context of societal, environmental, and economic challenges. Modern universities are therefore very much in a comparable situation as multinational companies. Only that they are, of course, much smaller and have smaller budgets to manage. Shared values are our common goals towards society. It is our duty to act in a sustainable fashion, and we must act as leaders jointly and globally. Finally, everything we do will have an impact on the environment. Creating shared values, or short CSV, is an initiative of Nestlé to using its global scale, its resources and expertise to contribute to a healthier future for people and the planet. Your global ambition to preserve the planet for the future is a shared value between our and your communities. We share even more shared values. In science, we have invented the Age Index to quantify the impact of researchers in research. Nestlé was one of the first companies in Europe to adopt Nutri-Score, aiming at continuously improving the nutritional value of their goods. Similar to scientists that continuously aim at improving their science, we do both understand that the ambiguity of indices that quantify our lives in discrete scales. Nevertheless, we need to move on and improve the quality of life while being environmentally sustainable. I'm therefore particularly interested in your view on how to foster sustainable development and the long-term health of both a company and the environment and how it is impacting. Even more so, as it is known that Nestlé is concerned with the sustainability of its actions and has taken further steps recently to systematically expanding its efforts. But I do not want to anticipate any further. Instead, let me thank you, the Europa Institute, for organizing this event and for giving us the chance to meet an experienced businessman today. And many thanks once again to Mr. Bulcke for dedicating some of his time to us. And now, Mr. Bulcke, the floor, or should I say the screen, is yours.
Well, thank you very much for that nice introduction. And dear Dr. Shepman, dear Dr. Kelleher, also Dr. Schwarzenegger, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you so much for having me here. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be able to share some thoughts on the current state of the world and what this means for stewarding a global company like Nestlé. But before coming this morning, I reread the speech delivered by Sir Winston Churchill exactly 75 years ago, here at the University of Zurich. I reread this famous speech with great interest, and yes, with some nostalgia. It is always a humbling experience to read the words of those who have constructively inspired and shaped the world that we live in today. And Churchill delivered his speech at a time when the world was rebuilding itself from the ruins and traumas of the Second World War. It was a time of change and of hope. It was also a time of ambiguity. And his speech reminds me yet again of the importance of understanding history, of recognizing different perspectives, of putting situations into context. It was a time of looking beyond immediate pressures and building our society for the long term. And all these are also essential ingredients, I believe, in stewarding a company through periods of change, of when trends are not clear and where there are differing ideas and convictions about the world we are living in. When, in other words, there is ambiguity. And this is the theme I would like to develop with you today, ambiguity, and what that means for a company like Nestlé and its board that is responsible to steward, take care of the company, so that it is kept in good health and well positioned for the future. I will make a few points by way of introduction to my thinking, but then I am particularly looking forward to answering some questions. But let me start with a quote that illustrates quite well what I mean by ambiguity. The quote comes from Frank Herbert, a 20th century American science fiction writer. He said, "The truth always carries the ambiguity of the words used to express it." The truth always carries the ambiguity of the words used to express it. Ambiguity. Ambiguity is not uncertainty. It is not complexity. Ambiguity is the idea that whatever the truth, it is open to different views, to different interpretations. Even when consulting the Oxford English Dictionary, the definition of ambiguity is, at least for me, not very clear. It is, well, indeed ambiguous. In sum, ambiguity arises when situations can be seen in different ways and are therefore easily open for misjudgment. When outcomes can be both good and bad, or right and wrong at the same time. When the decisions you may have to take have important trade-offs and the best outcome is a matter of interpretation. Uncertainty, on the other hand, arises when we don't have all the information that we might need. The solution to uncertainty would be to gather more information, more data, do more analysis. But having more data will not necessarily help to reduce or resolve the ambiguity. What is rather needed is judgment, good judgment. With this preamble, let me try to outline a few examples of ambiguity that I believe are also part of our business context today. The first example that comes to mind stems from the very speech that Churchill delivered here, when he outlined his vision for the United States of Europe. This was truly visionary. In his view, however, Britain was not to be a member. He said, we are with Europe, but not of it. We are linked, but not comprised. This clear ambiguity in the UK-Europe relationship that has existed since the very beginning of the European project exists still today. Brexit was just the latest manifestation of that. And the issue is still not fully answered. Is the UK a part of Europe, or is it not? Another example, globalization. For many years, actually, for the whole of my professional life, the world was globalizing, driven by technology and mindset. Economies around the world opened up to the cross-border movement of goods, of services, of ideas and people. And these led to the famous global value chains about which we are talking quite a bit. Today, the situation is far more ambiguous. The world is still globalized and is still globalizing further. Think about the huge amount of data, of digital information crossing the borders every day. But we are also seeing the return of localization. While economic governance at the global level has become considerably more complex and difficult to manage. Are we living in a globalizing world or an increasingly local world? Are we living in an integrating world or a disintegrating world? Or are we just living in a disconnected, connected world? There is also considerable ambiguity coming from the ongoing shifts in the economic and geopolitical powers. The past 20 years have seen the center of global economic activity shift to the east. China is now the largest economy in the world in purchasing power parity terms, and this has geopolitical consequences. And part of the tension between the US and China today certainly relates to that. Yet, at the same time, however, the US and China are strongly linked economically. In 2020, China was the largest US goods trading partner and the largest source of US imports. And US-China economic ties have grown, so have US concerns about China's economic, trade, investment, and technology practices. These and is another kind of ambiguity that comes from the change in company behavior. As companies, we are set up to compete in the marketplace. And increasingly, however, we realize that we must also collaborate with each other, especially when we want to address wider environmental and social challenges, such as climate change and food systems transformation, for that matter. An example of this is the 2030 Water Resource Group, which I currently have the privilege to co-chair. This multi-stakeholder platform, hosted by the World Bank, addresses the critical challenges of water scarcity, a problematic that is material for communities and society, as well as for companies like Nestlé. It takes an all-of-society approach, bringing together all relevant parties from government, from civil society, development organizations, and the private sector, to align and define cost-efficient actions on the ground. In this format, we find ourselves sitting alongside several of our competitors, from whom water is also a critical business and societal issue. And it works well, but there are very moments that it feels quite ambiguous. And I could go on. The question is, what does the rise in ambiguity today mean to steward a global company like Nestlé? Nestlé was founded more than 150 years ago in Vevey, here in Switzerland. It quickly became international, establishing a global production and commercial network spanning all continents, already at the beginning of the last century. Today, Nestlé is a truly global company. It is present in 186 countries with around 400 factories around the world. Nestlé employs just short of 300,000 people and works directly with more than 150,000 suppliers and over 500,000 farmers around the world. And with its long history, as well as its scale, geographic reach, and its local presence, ambiguity is not new for the company. Indeed, at the very beginning of my own career in Nestlé, I was posted in Peru. And it was in 1980, the year that saw the emergence of a revolutionary Mao-inspired guerrilla organization known as Shining Path. Different visions for the country were at loggerheads with each other in the worst possible way. People died, and the entire economic and society was disrupted and torn apart. What did Nestlé choose to do? It chose to remain active in the country, to double down and continue to ensure that food was available and accessible. While other companies left, there was never any question about Nestlé's commitment to the country. And this taught me my first lesson about leading through ambiguous times. Take a long-term perspective and be clear about your purpose and long-term vision, and have people committed to do this. As human beings, we are too often drawn to short-termism. This is natural. It is rooted in our survival instincts. But having a long-term perspective and vision is essential. It provides a context for decisions. It brings consistency over time and coherence to actions. It acts as a glue that brings all people in an ecosystem together. And this long-term vision is what drove us to continue operations in Peru back then. And it is also why Nestlé is still active today in, for example, Syria or Venezuela. In Venezuela, a country that is currently going through an economic and social crisis, Nestlé is still operating 5 factories and keeping 2,500 people on the payroll, giving them a livelihood and producing food products for our consumers. It has also made it natural for Nestlé to deliver its commitment to addressing global climate change and food system transformation. Through the lens of a long-term vision, sustainability is not only the right thing to do, it is a strategic necessity for a company that wants to safeguard its future and help feed the world in a sustainable and healthy way. Nestlé's commitments don't come from convenience. They come from conviction. The second thing I have learned about dealing with ambiguity is the importance of having a strong purpose, an explicit purpose, and explicit values. Purpose and values provide clarity about what an organization stands for and what is important to it. In ambiguous situations, when different interpretations of the same situation arise, values provide much-needed guidance. Most importantly, however, values also generate the capacity to judge, to make judgment when faced with difficult, ambiguous trade-offs. There may be cases where regulations are required, but as a society, we cannot regulate ourselves to glory. How do you regulate, for example, honesty? We need to rely on the capacity of people to judge appropriately, which is in turn related again to values. And finally, a third element I would bring to is the importance of being strongly anchored and engaged in the communities and of listening to the different voices in society. Part of this is about challenging our biases and assumptions. And part of this relates to the fact that being well embedded in society, where you are operating in, enables you to make judgments and therefore take decisions that are societally relevant and appropriate. It enables you to know and to do what is right. With these 3 elements in mind, long-term perspective, purpose and values, and societal engagement, let me conclude. My role as chair of the board of directors is to steward the company. That means it's to take care of it through the short-term pressures and position it in the best possible way for the future, to keep it, so to say, healthy today and tomorrow. In times of ambiguity, this role becomes particularly critical. Good governance becomes more than just compliance. It must deliver sound judgment. The board must listen carefully, evaluate appropriately, change course when needed, and deliver a strategic long-term vision that can guide decisions. It must convey strong values, and it must reflect on the multi-stakeholder nature of society and the role and the responsibility of the company in it. To do this, boards need to bring relevant, contextual thinking to the table. Therefore, they have to combine a strong awareness of the external environment, that is complex, with an in-depth understanding of the company, with its history and its culture. I have often said that the most important role of a board that the board can and should play is to ask the right, sometimes critical questions at the right time. Answers must then rest on the three elements I outlined above: a long-term vision, strong values, and finally, perspectives that are rooted in society. With these three guiding principles, I believe any company can navigate ambiguity with success. Thank you very much.
So, you kind enough mentioned Churchill, who actually really delivered this important speech here at the Zurich University. And he also said that he was a visionary man. Now we live 75 years later on. Would you say that this vision Churchill had have been coming true meanwhile? Where do we stay in Europe with regard to the dream maybe that people had right after the Second World War?
Well, he was speaking about the United States of Europe, so something happened there. So that was part of his vision. It was a shared vision, though. And also he said we empathize, but we're not part of that happened too. So he's a visionary. So I must say. But look, he was also somebody that, because of what he has experienced, had actually this capacity of seeing things in context. And I think that was his strength too, to see through the clutter of details and see the broader picture. And that's a little bit what I wanted to convey too. That is, watch out that you're not dragged into be lost in details. And it's, perspective is a very important quality. It's like when you drive a motorbike or a bicycle, you never look just in front of your wheel. You lose your balance. You look always 30, 40 meters in front of you to keep balance. Well, I think also leadership is asked to do that. It is to look just further. Today, we are dragged into short-termism, and with a pandemic, like a period like what we are living now today, even more so. And yet leadership is linked with, hey, yes, we have short-term intensity, but maintain this perspective on longer term. Sir Winston Churchill had that.
So he would have been somebody you would have elected on the board of Nestle, right?
Well, yes.
If he would still be around.
Look, good question though. Who should be on board?
Yeah.
And I come back to being able to ask the right relevant questions. So you need on the board people who can ask the right questions. And in a company like ours, where we have so many dimensions, be it we are worldwide, geopolitical, or economical, or science that is driving our future, food systems, the whole challenge about sustainability. You need actually people with these different backgrounds so that they complement each other, so that they can ask all relevant questions towards the company and management as such. So in that sense, yeah, he would definitely, be part of it in the sense of his perspective, his experiences, and sure.
So whenever there's a vacancy on your board, you do some kind of a matrix to say what is needed, right? We need someone who brings in those qualities that we might not have yet, right?
We do. We map and see who is with us, with what kind of angles, what can he bring, and see how that complements. And it's a changing world. Think about digital. That's more intense than 30 years ago. And so you need to adapt, but we have a normal refreshing because yes, people are rolling out. And so, but we do that definitely with purpose in the sense of what kind of background experience are we looking for?
You also spoke about globalization, and obviously that Nestle is a true global company. We right now are facing some difficulties in supply chains, and we see price of petrol and gas are going up and others. Are you also involved? Do you see this too for Nestle, that there's a problem coming with supply and that maybe globalization in a way has gone too far?
First, two parts of the question. We don't see these problems coming, they're there. I mean, so to start with. Second, so we're part of the world. So we living that. Now we have some answers to this. First of all, our supply chains are quite short because that's an option. But we have decentralized structures. We have factories all over the world to be close to our consumers, but also close to our farmers. So we have but still, you have certain dimensions that are affected. So and the supply chains where we were used to, that were quite fluid, are a little bit cluttered. And the problem is when you have not a lot of reserve, hence the efficiency we were looking for is now haunting us a bit. You have to slow down and then all of a sudden it kickstarts again. That is what's happening, and it's going to take some time you just see the huge ships waiting in the harbors, queuing up until that declutters. So we're going to have to count on a bit of tension for quite a while. But as I mentioned, we have some resistance to that, but we're part of the world. Globalization is actually a very important question. Do we want this? Do we not want this? And fact is, it's happening. Look, the information is flowing, and we may temporarily have reduced sympathy for it. And I believe a world that is, if I would ask, do you want to live in a globalized or a not globalized world? It looks like nice to say, no, I like my village, not globalized. If I would say, do you want to live in an integrated world or a disintegrated world? Then people say, no, disintegrated, it smells bad. We're definitely living in a connected world. So I think we have to find somewhere new balances. I do believe there is short-term anxiety in population, and the COVID doesn't help, and somewhere when it comes from the first financial crisis in 2008-9. That's where the first real feels about, hey, that had because of globalization wrong, but that was the perception. So we have to sort out some of these perceptions. But look, I still believe an integrated world where you have free flow of goods and services and people in an organized way. Hence also these international institutions that help to have some governance in this all is like the best place to be. There's some feelings now. Leadership has to sort it out and to put things in perspective for the broader population again. When local politicians are using globalization as an excuse for local dysfunctionalities, the image of a global world is getting down. That's true.
But might be an answer or a lesson we learn from that we make the distance shorter, the supply chain distances shorter, the length of them, so that we might not import any longer necessarily everything from China, but maybe from India, or make it more diverse, that we have more, sources where the goods are coming from, to make it less dependable from crisis or supply chain troubles.
Well, that's a little bit the trend you have now because of the clutter of containers, and you go on that somebody say, hey, you see, it was a bad idea. Well, it was not a bad idea. It was not well executed, or we didn't have reserves and all. I do still believe, too, that you don't have to produce everything in a certain place and then ship it all over the world. We should, but that has then to do with productivity, cost, and all these things. So it's not a simple answer. But look, we have opted as a company to be quite local. But that's also food. Food is local. And we privilege the freshness. We privilege also the diversity in our offerings that are geared towards the local flavors and habits. And we are close to our farmers, which is linked in again with how do we want to go about our existence in the future. That is linked with environmental challenges. And so we work with the farmers directly to help this regenerative agriculture, actually, which is linked with understanding and allowing nature to be nature. nature has that capacity of regeneration. After winter comes summer, right? All these things. So instead of having that in an abstract structure, global and supply chains, we are quite very close to the ground in the communities we're working in.
There's a question coming in from the audience. That how do you see the danger of food shortages due to the current rise in energy prices?
Well, the food shortages are not only because of the rising energy. Food is linked with energy. That's definitely, it's going to cost more. Energy is a cost. But I think food shortages in a broader time frame is a challenge. We had that 50, 60 years ago. You may remember the Club of Rome, where everybody was challenged and said, there's not going to be enough food. Then there came the Green Revolution. And I think we are, and as being a food and beverage company, we are asked to be part of looking really for solutions, here. If not, that's going to be just not because of energy. It's not going to be enough. Water is, and hence I mentioned that, the Water Resource Group. Water is such a driving element of conditioning the availability and the quality of food in the future. So we really have to go about this multi-stakeholder again, because it's not only company, it's not only governments, it's all stakeholders in society to go about this, to see how can we secure enough food for the 10 billion that are coming, and that's not too far away. How can we secure that in a way that is also environmental friendly? And that is linked with many dimensions, hence our plan of regeneration linked into this context of our commitment to net zero, because 2/3 of our greenhouse gas emission is linked with upstream agriculture. It is really to go about this in an integrated way, and we work with the farmers, soil quality, biodiversity, all these dimensions have to come into play. Hence also the importance of what the United Nations has called upon this in September, this convening about the future food systems. We want to be part of this. It is something that is already there. Food waste is another part. 1/3, the famous 1/3. What can we do about that? And so we have commitments there as industry-wide again. So much of that is also linked with waste on the farmland. What can be done there, and things like that. So lots of challenges, yet so many opportunities to do something in a different way. The science comes in too. To give science a meaning towards all these issues, also in the food. How can we motivate farmers to be proud to be farming again? The average age of the farmers is going up at 60+ years now. How can we enthuse younger generations to embrace this nice métier again? And it's also younger generations that embrace new technologies better and easier. So it's like we should get in this spiral of success somewhere.
You mentioned during your speech that it's necessary to have a long-term perspective. How do you get to this long-term perspective at Nestle? How do you vision, what's going to happen in 20, 30, 40 years? What kind of products you are making and producing? I remember there was once a strategy that you're going to buy or acquire mineral water sources, right? Or you were producing dog and animal food or health food. Nestle was famous for. Is this still part of your long-term strategy, or do you change over time and adapt your production lines?
No, your long-term perspective is a way of seeing and behaving and thinking. But the content of that thinking evolves. Look at this. Our pet care business was one of these that you think long, because pets are part of family, and you have to build it up over time. We are building up Nestle a platform. We're extending the boundaries of nutrition. Nestle Health Science is a good example of that. So we really embrace what we have, and yet there is something new in the making that's actually linked with needs of society are shifting. Aging population, for example. They need different nutrients. We were already there from the onset. Infants do need different nutrients. Aging population is part of that. Urbanization brings other needs. There's something like the microbiome, which is called the new frontier of medicine somewhere, the second brain. Well, we are about food. That is microbiome. How can true nutrients increase the quality of life of people in different stages in their lives? We are challenged on sugar, but how can we bring a pleasant experience, food experience, without that dimension? So we see the need of society growing and in new needs, states, and at the same time, science is evolving so fast that allows to give answers to these needs. Other needs of society, the healthcare sector. Well, the healthcare sector is quite an expensive part of society. In the United States, it's above 20% of GDP, healthcare, and going up. And in Europe, it's give and take 10, 15% going up. Then you have that organized for give and take 1/3 of the world. And the two-thirds of the world are building up their systems. They cannot afford to have. But food can be such a driver, inducive health instead of therapeutic corrective health. Can we play there? Can we be part of this? Hence, Nestlé Health Science is embracing these opportunities. So it is to solve a problem, and yet at the same time, it gives us perspective of a successful future. Is that long-term view? Yeah. There's somewhere, it's not defined 100%. It's gray. The dust has to settle. But we feel if one company can go and embrace this, it should be Nestlé. And at least we don't want to fail and not to be part of this. It's fascinating, motivating journey.
But Nestle will always remain a food company, basically, or
whatever I said was still linked with nutrients and food. We are our purpose is to unlock the power of nutrition, to enhance quality of life for the generations of today and the ones to come. And if you link it all up, it is all about nutrients, nutrition. It is for today and the future, so environmental and sustainability comes in. But the power of nutrition, we are a food and beverage company fully aware that these are carriers of nutrients. They are also enablers of quality of life. A good cup of coffee, Nescafé or Nespresso for that matter, is a good moment. And yet, at the same time, you can say, yeah, but if you drink, but there's antioxidants in there, but it gives you a good moment. It's part of quality of life. So that's our conviction. That's where we work on, and it is evolving. 30 years ago, we didn't speak about Nestlé Health Science. And now we are speaking about that. We're building it up. It is growing, and we are investing heavily in science and insights, and I'm sure that is going to be such an important part of our future. And yet still, we're going to go about coffee. We're going to go about a bouillon cube, for that matter, or milk products. Look, another example, these plant-based proteins, which is actually a good combination of many ambitions. First, it is definitely environmental friendly because the impact on certain criteria versus animal proteins is 1 to 10. But you can also, with farming practices and all that, you have much more efficiency also on land per square acre and per acre, and there you go. So we're embracing that. It's not new to us. 30, 40 years we're working on plant-based proteins, but all of a sudden it got to the awareness and embracing of society. People are enthusiastic about a plant-based burger. Well, that is helping these. We are fully engaged there and looking for. We have not only a burger. Burger is like a placeholder. It's like the symbol of. But we have tuna. We call it the vuna, which is vegetable tuna. As a spread, you cannot differentiate that. Totally natural, bio, and that's technology serving you to help and give answers that are combining, again, good nutritious products that are environmental friendly. Without science, not possible. So that's why we have such an engaging research and development structure.
These are noble goals and very useful activities you have. How do you explain that sometimes Nestle has a bad press, that Nestle is criticized for
It's logical.
making money on the needs of people somehow, right?
No, but look, we exist. That's why. That's why we exist. We do. We have a size. Everybody knows us because everybody touches our products. If I would be producing turbine blades, but there we are. And isn't that so much more interesting as a company to be in that dialogue permanently? Is it not interesting to be in a dialogue where you have pros and cons and actually living the ambiguity I was just speaking about? What a nice example at the end of the day. Yes, by having a size, yes, by existing, yes, by we are creating, we are being part of greenhouse gas. Sure. And the scale we have makes it so visible. And yet then comes that criticism maybe. And yet at the same time, all what I just mentioned is so much also true to be part of the solution and do something. So no, I feel, look, that's how the world is. There is different opinions on things. There's messaging. There is usage of names like Nestle for other messages. It's part of our existence. And actually, it's not bad. It keeps us really very much awake.
Okay. I have a couple of questions coming in through the internet. One is, when including stakeholders, how are affected communities included? Does Nestle have a company-owned mechanism or procedure? Question mark.
For inclusion of communities we're working in. But look, first of all, I repeat that we are very decentralized local. We have, give or take, 400 factories in the world. I give you an example of Punjab. Quite a few years ago, we started there with a milk district in the Punjab. And so a milk district that we have learned. So we bring in best practice out of Switzerland, Konolfingen, Gruyere, you go on. So we bring it there to farmers that were normally used to lose quite a bit of their milk and they didn't have actually. So, and you start to build it up with agronomes and you have and there's self-interest in there because we wanted to build a factory. It was an area that was very good for milk districts. So you start to do that. And you work with these farmers. At the beginning, they come, we have 150,000 farmers too, coming with their milk. And that was a few liters a day. And then you say, yes, but it's very hot there, so cooling stations. And we don't put it there. They do it as a cooperative, and like we have seen here in Switzerland. And you work over time. That factory still exists. It's a very important milk factory and all. And the local communities have been part of this journey with us. So we need good raw materials. We secure that, helping the farmers to give us that. They have better income, better livelihood, and there you go. Now, that's how you build something. But even by staying in a country, even when it's not a nice time, good or bad, we stay. I mentioned Venezuela. I'm actually proud there. The local management, how they re-engineered the supply chains permanently and to see, because it's totally disrupted. We still have 2,500 people on the payroll. That means 2,500 families getting an income. I can tell you, we're not staying for the money there. This is investment for the long-term perspective and future, because we have our brands. We don't want to lose the empathy of the consumers with us. We're part of their community. And you have our people there doing it. It's not easy. I take my hat off for them. And that's not only there, in many other countries too. It's never a straight line. But you know, that's a little bit, they call it sometimes, somebody told me, Nestle has a good capacity to suffer. I would not say suffer. We have a good capacity to invest and to believe. And I've been for more than 40 years in the company. Why? Well, it was never boring to start with. I moved on, etc. But I feel so much identified with these longer-term commitments to the communities and the countries I have lived in. I've seen it. It's very motivating.
Can I take from that will to stay even, during difficult times in countries where Nestle is doing business, that also Nestle will stay in Switzerland? How important is being a Swiss-based company for Nestle?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Because I don't feel there are reasons for the question in the sense of, hey, is Nestle going to stay in Switzerland?
To put it differently, how important is this Swiss label for Nestle? Is it important?
But we are a Swiss company at the end. We are based here. We're born here. We are based here. Switzerland is not a bad place to be, to start with. I live here now. I became Swiss. And so much, I would say, empathy with the values this country stands for that are also our values. Think about long-term thinking, pragmatism, consistency in time, dependability. These are Swiss qualities that I would care for Nestle to keep these qualities too. We have our headquarters, we have our R&D here. It's a place where, look, the University of Zurich, where we are sitting here, is a good example of that. Multidisciplinary coming together in the same place are things that have driven so much of our R&D. Now, look, we are over 10,000 people here in this country. We are give and take in over 10 cantons with operations. We have our international headquarters with our R&D, and 2/3 of our R&D is happening here. We have 100 nationalities in Switzerland on our payroll. So, Switzerland allows us to be, a global, local company.
So maybe we come to our next question, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you pointed out that...
Microphone.
Yes, Mr. Bulcke, thank you very much. I want to ask you, you stressed the social responsibility of multinational enterprises in your speech. You even mentioned the case of Venezuela, where you somehow take over government roles or at least the duty of an enterprise is mixing with the duty of a government. Now, my question is, how do you see the role of universities in the future? What are kind of the new directions that the university should take? And what kind of leadership you expect from universities to grow?
But look, I don't think companies should take over the role of authorities. We should do what we have to do, which is going about our business per se, but that with I would say, being part of society sense and long-term view. Stick to, continue doing that with. We should, though, also induce the governments to play their part. That's true. We should be in conversation. Say, hey, you have so many examples of regulations, and mind you, I don't want to be of this self-centered, short-term interest lobbying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to be part of shaping, framing a society, and be part of bringing our angle in there and think. Universities are part of that discussion at the end. So, and you are preparing here the leaders of the future. So bringing that capacity of judgment towards beyond the course, he can be engineer or doctor, judgment, to be open to. I was student too, critical on society. That happens, that's part of. But I think somewhere inducing through, there's many systems to do that, discussion rounds or going beyond the course per se, opening up, going the 30 meters in front of your wheel, allowing youth to be young and critical, and yet at the same time bring in the other angles. I think that's very important. That whatever discipline you're learning, you can be specialist labo or true, and yet see the broader picture. Because I do feel that in our leadership there may be sometimes lack of perspectives on things. Of what creates a little bit this polarization that you see now in the world. That's so. Working with, and we're going to need more working together, kind of with companies per se. Why? Because we're going to have to do before you could prepare people for the rest of their careers. More give and take, never was like that. But no, you can prepare. Actually, you can prepare people for a certain discipline and then build an awareness of, hey, that's just a start. Continue learning, etc. And we have to do part of that as a company too. This permanent learning, the future of work is a topic that is of your interest. But these are things that we're not going to do alone. We're not going to start doing our permanent training dimension totally dislinked from universities. Somewhere we're going to have to see ways of permanently connecting. But this contextual capacity to think in context of somewhere of students is not a bad thing. I would wish some of our actual leaders have more of that.
There's another question coming in from the audience that said, do you think that humanity will be fed as vegetarians in the future? Will meat become the champagne of the 21st century only for an elite?
No. Again, there's no absolute answer to this, but I don't believe that meat has to be bad, it's bad. Look, that's very strange. Ambiguity speaking, milk was the paradigm of healthy food. It was a paradigm. I remember when I was young, we were in the milk brigade. Europe had too much milk, you may remember, and they had mountains and of butter, and we had to drink milk, and it was seen as the good, best food, etc. And still today, to a certain extent. And now, milk from cows is bad. That has, and I understand the reaction. There's the pendulum come. So having a good steak or a good burger once in a while is not a bad thing. But I do believe that vegetable proteins do have so much promise of being part of quality of life. It's not a sacrifice. I do believe that vegetable proteins is not going to be only a replacement of meat. It's going to be part of the nutritional offerings in general. Think about meat, a good bolognese sauce, for example. There's meat in there. But if you put plant proteins in there, you cannot notice. You don't eat bolognese for the meat per se. The steak is something else. So I think here and there is a small-sized steak is going to be part of my life. It's going to be part of many people's life. It's not going to be a luxury per se, but it's going to be part of. It's the same with fish. Overfished oceans and all that. So there has to be given answers. Now, if I can give you a tuna experience because you're used to it, but maybe I find something new that is not even tuna nor another fish, but it's just, you like to eat it. Well, rewarding. These are the things that's going to move. Now we are still too much in, we replace food. We replace milk, which is logical. It's the first, but we're going to have new dimensions coming that are plant-based and hence also much more, I would say, environmentally friendly.
We might have to come to a last question time-wise. You spoke about ambiguity And if I got it right, you said that this is basically to accept that there are different views. You can look at things from a different way, and that you have to accept these different views, maybe even put yourself in other people's shoes in order to understand them better. Can there be somehow a conflict with your own values, that you have values you firmly believe, as maybe as Nestle has values, right? That the company stands for, and then that out of this ambiguous view from another side, there is a conflict between it.
Well, that's actually one of the most difficult and yet rewarding dimensions of leadership, is when you come into a situation that values are global. There's no such thing as, yeah, honesty for me is different than for you. So values are basics, are equal. So that's why, for example, our values are based on respect. Respect for yourself first. That's where authenticity, what I say, I do, you can count and trust. Respect for the others is a second dimension. That's where you respect the others, you build trust relationships, your promises, you hold them. And these are values everywhere in the world. The third one is respect for diversity, hence different views. We, 100 nationalities in our headquarters alone. We have 150 blends of Nescafé. We respect different taste profiles. That's another diversity. Different ways of doing things in different countries, we respect that. That's the third respect. And the fourth one is the respect for the future. Very important. That's where this long-term thinking, but also environmental dimensions, making sure that the next generation can just have this motivated life you had. These are our values. Now, there's not, on the values, not different angles to it. So, and these are the yardsticks or the references that you use for judgment. For example, we are sometimes challenged, hey, can you be in that country? Well, first of all, watch out. We should not be instrumentalized to do agendas that government should do. We should not be pushed there. Sometimes they try, or they feel, hey, something has to happen, and then they use. But whenever we can live up to our values, we can produce quality food, safe food. We can do that, and we can safeguard our assets, but our people, we can have them in safety. And we stay on, because our commitment is with the local communities, is with the consumer, you see. So it's sometimes hard, because they say, hey, should you do a product? Should we do whatever product that has 1 calorie of sugar? It depends on your angle. Yes, we should. It's still part of. But where we can bring in answers to reduce it, to be part of a healthy lifestyle, to be transparent on, to drive these new agendas, these new awarenesses, and be part of it, I think, yeah, we should stay. And that's why we have stayed and that's why we are still having products with some sugar in it, but much reduced already. And we're looking for ways of doing it further, because before, calories was what was where people were looking for. You see these paradigm shifts, and seeing that and being part of that society that is on the move. And yes, criticize and all, yes, but much feeling part of. And part of the solution, too, is what motivates us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bulcke. That was a fascinating hour we spent with you and learning your views. Come back. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.